divine one, as God as the one to be worshiped. And he singles God out and he exalts God. Some people call this psalm a messianic psalm, and some call it a lament. At any rate, it is a song filled with prayer and praise. And you'll notice as we go through the number of times when the psalmist uses the first person as compared to the third person to refer to God. And sometimes when we hear people pray or when we pray, we can tell when people switch from the first person to the third person to talk about God, because in the midst of their prayers, they'll stop talking to God and start talking to the people who are before them. But when you're talking to God, you address God in a way that addresses God personally, as opposed to addressing God as in the third person. The third person is that he, she, it person. So we talk to God as though we spoke to God in the first person or in the second person. And you'll find that in this psalm, the times when he'll use you or my when he speaks directly to God, or I when he speaks directly to God, and the times when he uses a third person. So let's see what that psalm has to say, and then we'll see how it helps us in our troubled time to talk and think about good things. First of all, we'll read through the psalm together, and then we'll come back and unpack it a piece at a time. Keep me safe, my God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, as that third person, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing. I say of the holy people who are in the land, they are the noble ones in whom is all my delight. Those who run after other gods will suffer more and more. I will not pour out libations of blood to such gods or take up their names on my lips. Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. You make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. I will praise the Lord who counsels me. Even at night my heart instructs me. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand I will not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure. Because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, nor will you let your faithful one see decay. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy and in your presence with eternal pleasures at your right hand. So the psalmist is delighted, and he expresses his delight, and he seems to be aware to some degree of the fact that God has chosen him and has set him apart and has given him certain assurances. That's why we believe, scholars believe, that this is a psalm written after the occasion of David's recognition, the revelation to him that a temple, a place for God, would be built. Read about it in 2 Samuel chapter 7 when you have a chance. So in a time when we are challenged to find good things, to see good things, to identify good things, to name good things, the psalmist in Psalm 16 is keenly aware of some good things. When it was 1970, between 72 and 74, my niece, Dewana, was between 1 and 3 years old, and she was diagnosed with leukemia in Baton Rouge. Day after day, her mother took her to the hospital on Airline, the Earl K. Long Hospital, I think was the name of it, on Airline Highway in Baton Rouge, and she was devoted to her little girl, trying to see to it that her daughter was well. Well, I was living at Fort Eustis, Virginia, 2303A 13th Street on Fort Eustis, right across the street from this big wide open parade field, Murphy Field, I think they called it. And I'd go out and stand on my patio, which faced the parade field, and I'd pray to God that God would save my niece. And it was my time of a covenant. I made a deal with God on that occasion. I said, God, if you will save Dewana's life, I'll do anything you say. And little did I know what plans God had for me. So I decided right away to go out and join the senior choir at First Baptist Morrison, and I joined the senior choir. I think I was 23 years old or so, and Martha Smith was one of the premier musicians in the area, taught me how to sing bass. So I learned how to sing in the choir. And the Lord said to me, "That's nice. I appreciate that, but that's not it." And sometime later, my pastor, Marcellus Lee Harris Jr., came to me and he said to me, "I want you to be a deacon in the church." So in 1975, I was ordained as a deacon at First Baptist Morrison, and the Lord said, "That's nice. That's nice. You're a good deacon. You're doing a good job." It was not long before I was at the Gospel Hour Fellowship services in Erlangen, Germany, when under the leadership of Marvin Hurst, I found myself called to be a minister. It's a really unforgettable experience. I was home alone one evening. I'd come in from work, and my wife and son were both out, and out of nowhere, a helicopter, a Chinook, a big cargo helicopter, came. It seemed it was right overhead, over my complex, and it shook the building, and the sound it just had everything rattling. And I couldn't understand why this Chinook was hovering over my house for so long. Why didn't it move? Because typically the Chinook would come over, you'd hear it coming, and you'd hear it going. But in this case, it seemed to just be standing there. And it hovered over my house for the longest time. And for the life of me, I heard the audible voice of God say to me, "You'd be all right if you just do what I tell you." And I had been wrestling with this physical condition that nobody could understand, and it wouldn't go away. And the doctor said, "Well, I don't know what's wrong with you. You have this relentless, elevated body temperature that just wouldn't leave me." And I couldn't shake it, but I always felt it. But that day, when I heard the voice of God, and it occurred to me that I had made this deal with God about what he would do, what I would do if he blessed Dewana. And Dewana's now, I think, 42 or so. And here I am doing what I'm doing, because I told the Lord, "If you just save my niece, I'll do whatever you say." And it must have been that kind of opportunity, that kind of expression that came over David when he got the word from Nathan that God had chosen him to do what God chose him to do. God's covenant with David, like my covenant with God regarding Dewana. David now, in Psalm 16, makes it clear who his God is. He could have deified anyone or anything, and we often do. Sometimes we deify people. Sometimes we deify possessions. Sometimes we deify whatever we choose to deify. So think about that thing that you cannot live without. If there's a person in your life and you can't live without them, or you think you can't live without them, if there's property in your possession and you think you can't live without that property, if there's something else that you possess, an artifact, a piece of silver or gold or some other thing that you treasure, and you think you cannot live without that thing, I would argue that you have come to a place in your life where you have deified that thing. You've made that the object of your affection. You've made that thing, that person, the object of your own adoration. You made that thing so that it means more to you than perhaps anything else means to you. And you're skirting on the edges of idolatry, and maybe you've already gone over to the other side because you have deified a person or a thing. But David, for all his failings and faults in life, for all of the mistakes that he made, for all of his ups and downs, comes to this place in his life where he makes a declaration about who his God is. And he identifies God, "Thou O Lord, art my God. And so he makes it plain. There's no question. There's no exception about it. There's no wandering in his mind about who his God is. Soon after my experience in Germany, I came back from Germany, and I was back on the peninsula. I was in school at Fort Eustis, Virginia, and at that time, practically every Baptist church on the peninsula held 2 revivals every year, one spring and one in the fall. And they'd get together and figure out so that everybody wouldn't have revival at the same time. And I went to revival every time a church was open. So if I found out there was a revival, I wanted to be there. Fred Body was the pastor of First Church Newport News Baptist. That's the real name of it. And he invited a young man who was said to be the nephew of Martin Luther King. His name was Derek King. And he invited Derek King to be the evangelist that week. And I heard from Derek King a sermon that I'll never forget, or an illustration in a sermon that I'll never forget. King talked about a man who had a certain trophy that he possessed. And he really, really adored his trophy. And he see to it that his trophy was always polished and shiny. And he set it up on the mantle, which was a prominent place in his house where he could always see his trophy. And it happened that on one occasion his house burned down, and his trophy lay in the rubble of the fire. And so he went through the rubble and he found this object of his adoration, this object of his affection, and he picked it up from the rubble and soot, and he took a clean cloth and he rubbed away all the black soot that had come, that had soiled his treasure, and he was happy once again that his treasure had survived the fire. And at the end of the illustration, what the preacher says was, I'm so glad that instead of having a God that I have to dust off, I have a God who can dust me off. And so it is in this psalm. David makes it clear that his God is a God who is uniquely to be praised, uniquely to be identified. Keep me safe, my God. In you, I take it right. What kind of God can't save you? What kind of God can't keep you? What kind of God can't help you? What kind of God would your God be if he couldn't keep you in spite of anything, and couldn't keep you in every good way, so that every good thing would be yours, so that you wouldn't have to fear the worst of circumstances. You wouldn't have to fear the worst of possibilities. You wouldn't have to fear the worst of outcomes. But our God keeps from us no good thing, so that we don't have to worry about dusting our God off in the case of fire. In the case of fire or famine or flood or COVID-19, God dusts us off. He preserves us. He keeps us. And in the language of Job, and even if he doesn't keep us, we still trust him. Or in the words of the Hebrew boys, our God is able to keep us through this fire. But if he does not keep us through this fire, he's still able. And so David exalts, he celebrates, he worships this kind of God who is uniquely qualified, I call him, who is singularly powerful to save, to help, to keep, and he keeps us. And so in his invocation, in this part of David's prayer to God is kind of a combination of an invitation and a celebration as he asks God to keep him. That's what we do when we invoke the presence of God early on in our prayers. We ask God to meet us where we are. And so we ask God to meet us where we are in the loftiest language we can manage. And with the highest superlatives that are in our vocabularies, and with the most flattering language that really expresses our genuine connection to God and our full recognition that God is uniquely who God is, that there's nobody like our God. It's possible for us to deify whoever we want to deify whatever we want to. I've told you before, when you apply for a loan to buy a house, the real estate broker wants to know about your net worth, and he wants to know how much money you have and how much credit you have. And so they'll tell you the most expensive house for which you qualify, because they want you to spend as much as you'll spend on this thing that's supposed to be the most valuable possession you will ever earn. The problem is, you can get whatever you can get based on what your income is at any given moment, or based on your net worth at any point in time. The problem is, things could change. And so your net worth today is less than it was 60 days ago. Not because you earn any less money, but because everything that you have is worth less now than it was worth then. And so if you fell for the real estate broker's okey doke and bought whatever he wanted you to buy, whatever she wanted you to buy, then every morning about sunrise, you can feel your house vibrating, telling you to, all right, you better get yourself up out of bed and go out there and get my money, because your house ends up driving your life, because your possessions, your car, your house, your spouse, whatever it is that you have come to adore, to worship, to bow down before, to sacrifice for, to give up for, to kowtow. There's a Chinese expression, kowtow, which means to bow low before, so that you bow low before this possession. One. So you bow down low before that possession, and you honor that, you adore that, you as it were worship that. That's what worship is. To worship is to adore, it's to bow down, it's to surrender, it's to submit to. And I would argue that among the things to which we might submit are some good things and some no good things. Some things that offer us a sense of safety and security, and some things that offer us a sense of dread and awe. If you think about the fictional movie King Kong, King Kong is a giant of a figure to be feared, and in a primitive place where people fear this beast, they decide that in order to avoid the wrath of the beast, what they have to do is appease him, and so they make human sacrifices to him. And one of my biggest peeves is that they think that they've really given him something special when they give him a white girl with blonde hair. I don't know what they've been giving him before, but this is the first time a white girl with blonde hair showed up. They offered her to the beast. That's another whole different story. But they do this human sacrifice with the expectation that the beast will be appeased. Well, I don't want a God who I have to appease. I do want a God who I have to please, but not appease. And I really appreciate Paul's rendition of sacrifice, because my sacrifice, my living sacrifice, is my service, is my surrender, is my submission, it's my desire to accomplish what he has in store for me to accomplish, to perform his will and his way according to his word. That's the kind of God that David addresses when he talks about the God who will keep him, and he appeals rather to this God to keep him, and he thanks God for not withholding from him any good thing, so that he does not deify anything or anyone else. He makes it plain and clear before God that there's nobody like you. Yes, Deacon Stokely.
Oh, man. I was listening, and I was just reflecting about when my grandma was living, and how she used to tell us, she said, God's a jealous God. And he put nothing before him. Because I remember when I had a brand new car. It was an 89 Escort GT. I had that thing decked out. And I used to just shine that thing up, shine it up. And 3 months later, a guy came and just, bam! And my grandma told me, said, that's why I keep telling you all, don't treasure stuff like this.
Yeah.
And because when we should look for, like you said earlier, when we look for stuff that we love so much, it don't last. Right. It's just temporary. It stays for a little while. But the God that we serve, he's there all the time. His love lasts forever. And I can remember that when you were saying it, and that's why I was chuckling, because I can remember taking that car and making it out of something it shouldn't have been. But then I think about it too. It could be my life that was gone. But I was in the car. I was out the car, but when somebody hit it. So I'm glad that God is a loving God.
Yeah. Shakespeare says, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love that alters when it alterations find, nor bends with a remover to remove. Love's not time's fool. Love is not time's fool. God's love is not the fool of time, does not change, but everything that we cherish, everything that we adore, no matter how much we love it, we can't, it does not remain what it was. It changes with the passage of time. Things just have a way of deteriorating. Yes, Your Highness.
I had to think too, sometimes we think about things, but I found that I had placed my identity in the wrong thing. I had found value in the wrong thing, and it began to be my value. So when it was ripped away, I was kind of blown away.
Yeah.
When if my value had remained in him who had created me, I would have been stable as a spring breeze instead of rolling around in the storm.
Yeah, I like that. Turn up your volume for next time you talk. From 96 to 2003, I had what I thought was the best job I ever had in my life. I identified myself with my job, and I thought that as long as I had that job, I was in it and on it, and I was it. And so I was very proud and downright arrogant about it because of my position, my title, and the place that I had to serve. It was a pastoral assignment, and lots of people said they appreciated my ministry, and I appreciated the fact that they appreciated my ministry. And I thought that the Lord had blessed me to be in the position that I wanted to be in for my life. And then I lost my job in 2003. One Sunday, I think we were doing 2 services at the time, and at the end of the second service, I served communion at the first service. I even served my boss communion at the first service. And then the second service, we went through the second service, and I was the worship leader for that service. And I got a word from his secretary. He said that he wants to see you. Of course, everybody knew who he was. And I went in to see him, and he said, unfortunately, this is the last day we get to work together. And I was blown away. And for weeks, if not months, I was so depressed because I had wrapped myself in my position and my identity, and that's how I thought of myself. So it's possible for us to deify another person, and it may even be possible for us to deify our of who we are. And that was my problem in that instance. But David seems to have no such problem with who his God is. And he opens this psalm with information that declared the goodness and the glory of that God, saying, preserve me, keep me safe. I don't know if I'm in trouble or not. I don't know what's going on around me. I know what I've been through, but I'm grateful for having a great relationship with you so that we are connected. You are my Lord. That excuses every other one. Not you are one of my lords. Not you are one of the lords at whose feet I bow. Apart from you, I have no good thing. Everything else is worthless in comparison to who you are to me. And the third verse, I say of the holy people who are in the land, they are the noble ones in whom is all my delight. One more. Those who run after other gods will suffer more and more. I will not pour out libations of blood to such gods or take up their names on my lips. Imagine this is the sacrifice. This is the act of sacrifice, so that if it's a dove or a lamb or a bull, the priest, as an act of sacrifice, takes the animal and cuts its throat and pours out the blood of the animal on some altar, some stone, some place, and it is an act of sacrifice intended to please, to mollify whatever God is being worshipped. But in this psalm, David makes it plain, I ain't sacrificing nothing. I ain't pouring out no blood. I ain't pouring out no wine. I'm under no illusions, but that you are my God. And he makes it plain. He said, they who go after other gods are going to be suffer more and more. So they'll continue to go through what they continue to go through. And if that's what they choose to do, that's on them. But for me, he makes it plain, I'm not going to pour out any blood. I'm not going to any libations in their order. I mean, in their sacrifice. I'm not giving up anything. I'm not. I won't even call the name of another god. I won't worship. And there was no shortage in David's time of other opportunities for people to worship false gods. In that time, they're worshiping mythological gods or interplanetary gods or seasons of the year or animals in the fields, birds or cows or animals that they had decided were worthy of worship. And so people attached affections that should properly be attached to God to these idols, and they worship them. And the danger is for us to elevate a good thing or a no good thing, for good or for evil, to the place where we deify that thing, so that in awe or fear or wonder, we feel like we have to appease that God. We have to appease COVID-19 by bowing down before COVID-19 and give up and sacrifice, give in, to surrender, to submit to it as though we had no charge over it. But we do have charge over it, and it requires a different reaction when it comes to the place where we decide to submit. Yes, Mary?
We have a question from the chat room.
Uh-huh.
And the question is it true that God can bless us with things and then we lose focus?
Well, if you ask me that in a very personal way, it's even like my confession to you of a few minutes ago. God blessed me with a dream job. with a dream possession in my life. I earned more in that time than I have at any other time in my life, and I was recognized around the state of New Jersey, so that if I used the name of my employer, I could open practically any door. I'll never forget he used to send me to places as a surrogate. One time he sent me to a place on his behalf, and I prided myself on the fact that my seatmate was Queen Latifah's mother. And so the two of us sit side by side as he's talking to me about Dana, and I'm so stupid I don't even know who Dana is. And I didn't know I was supposed to be impressed by the fact that I was sitting next to Queen Latifah's mother. And so I was so happy just to be there that I'm sure that in my time I lost sight of the fact that he had blessed me to be where I was, to have what I had, and to be doing what I was doing, and to draw so much pleasure from it. But my brother told me that had I not lost that job, there are so many good things that I never would have done, because having that job meant so much to me. And so I lost focus, I'm sure, and perhaps there are other people who would have a similar testimony, that under different circumstances they have become so enamored of the blessing, the gift, that they forgot about the giver. So rather than treasuring the giver, I treasured the gift. Yes, Mary?
I think that's why it's so important to start like David did, as humble and not necessarily poor, but submitting and learning how to submit first, so that when he got the blessing, it didn't define him. Mm-hmm. Because when we step into those powerful places, we forget that the Lord put us there for a reason. If we haven't recalibrated to his will and his way, we're wasting what he gave us.
I agree with you. I think that's profound, a profound observation. So that David celebrates a great relationship with a great friend. Let's see verses 3 and 4 together. I say of the holy people who are in the land, they are the noble ones, in whom is all my delight. Those who run after other gods suffer more and more. I will not pour out libations of blood to such gods, or take up their names on my lips. When the 12 tribes were named, and when they received their portions, their inheritances, the lands that they acquired, everybody except the Levites received a portion. They all each had an allotment. And the Levites were expected to be taken care of by the tabernacle, by the temple, by the tithes, by the income that came in, so that the priests did not need an allotment. They did not need an inheritance, because they were taken care of by God in a very direct way as a result of the income that came into the temple. In these days, some people call it the temple tax, or some call it the tithe. It's the money that comes into the church that takes care of those who are in the priestly order, so that not every minister is blessed to draw income for his survival and the survival of his family from the church. Many have other jobs, so that they depend on a bivocational existence. They depend on laying bricks or doing something else in order to receive their income and to take care of themselves and their families. But David talks about a people in this psalm in verses 3 and 4 in contrasts. The ones who are the people of the land, as they are called, Ha'edits, the people of the land, who receive their income from the land. And then there are the others who are, in this instance, would be likely non-believers or idol worshipers who draw whatever they get from wherever they get it from, and they worship in an idol way, and they worship gods who have eyes and can't see, and lips who can't speak, and when you call their names, they can't answer. If you believe they can, ask the prophets of Baal who called all day long, asking for their God to answer, and he ain't answered yet. Yeah, so he had a great relationship, and he had a great friend, and that good friend he calls the Lord, and he names the Lord in that third person kind of language. Verses 5 and 6. Lord. So there's no question about who he's talking to. When you we teach in the process of education, when you are in the classroom, you ask, and then you pause, and then you call. You ask the question, then you wait for the question to marinate, and then you call on a student in the class to answer. Ask, pause, and call. Well, David leaves no wonder about the subject or the object in his conversation. He names him in the first word in this verse. Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup. And then he has a plea. You make my lot secure. His confidence is in him. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. Everybody didn't get the same inheritance. The Levites didn't get an inheritance at all. They didn't get an allotment at all. But when David, in the words of Gladys Falcon, looks back over his life and thinks things over, he remembers what God has done for him, that it could have been different than it was. I can hear, every time I hear Ricky sing that song, he said, I was just sitting over there thinking, and then looking back over my life, and I should have been dead, or could have been dead, sleeping in my grave, but he made death behind. How many places might we have been other than in Olive Grove tonight? How many places might we have been with COVID-19 ravaging the world, with millions affected and hundreds of thousands dead? And yet here we are. And what's the reason? Is it because we've washed our hands? Is it because we have worn our masks? Is it because of social distancing? Is it because we have been so careful about protecting ourselves? Is it because we have avoided other people altogether? Is it because we've been quarantined in our own homes? Is it because of something else that we have said or seen or done? It's just the grace of God that allows our, as they used to say when I was a boy, golden moments to roll on a little while longer, so that we continue to exist. So David is careful to acknowledge that his gifts are not his because he has deserved them. His gifts are not his. His boundaries are not as they are because of anything that he's done. It's a great warrior king who has had the capacity to rewrite boundaries just based on the fact of victories in battle. And yet he takes no credit for his place, and neither should we. And can we dare afford take credit for the places that God allows us to see, the things that he allows us to have and to hold, especially when we don't lose sight of the fact that every good gift comes from God. And so that when you're looking for good things, you can't look for good things in bad places. And so David sings this song over and over about the good things that have come to him. his boundaries have fallen in pleasant places. The around the country in the next few years, one of the biggest legal battles to be fought at every level, practically, is the boundaries of voting blocks. When I lived in New Jersey years ago, my boss, same guy I'm talking about, he was a really popular person, and the white people believed he was really popular among black people. And so in the state gerrymandering and drawing lines for voting communities, they drew this long, narrow, meandering band from central New Jersey down past Trenton, and they tried to scoop up in their wake all these black neighborhoods, thinking that if they had these black people in these neighborhoods, they would all vote for him, and therefore he would win. Well, they drew the boundaries, but he didn't win when he ran for Congress. But David is happy that for his sake, his boundaries have fallen in pleasant places. So that when he talks about the reaches of his authority, the reaches of his kingdom, he's happy because he's ended up in a good place. Maybe he remembers, he makes me to lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters and restores my soul. Maybe he's thinking about how long God has been taking care of him and how well God has taken care of him, because our boundaries might be described as the places in life where we have been blessed to go and the places in life where we have been blessed to avoid. Because some of the places that might have been worse for us, we don't even know, because we don't know about what didn't happen. We don't know about the accident that we missed. We don't know about the plane that didn't crash or the boat that didn't sink. We don't know about the food that didn't poison us, that didn't kill us. We don't know about the virus that was in the air, but it didn't affect us. We don't even know all of it. What we do know is how good God has been to us and in what ways God has been good to us. And so he's jumped up and down now. He's celebrating the fact that God has been his companion. God has been his friend. God has kept him in the worst of circumstances and has kept him in the best of circumstances as well. So he does not forget the good and the bad in his life when he talks about the good things that he has seen and said and done. And the next two. I will praise the Lord who counsels me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. This is where some scholars argue that this is a messianic psalm. This is a psalm that talks about what happens in the life of Jesus, who is in the line of David, so that he doesn't in the midst of all of this language that extols, that exalts, that celebrates the goodness of God, David is careful in this psalm to praise and to commit himself to praising. It's the fulfillment of our purpose. It's why we our existence, why we created. And so I will praise the Lord who counsels me. So he could take credit for his pleasant boundaries. He could take credit for his achievements. He could take credit for his strength and for his victories on the battlefield, or his victories over lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. But he doesn't take credit for that. He says, I will praise you who counsels me. So there's another psalm that you can't get out of your head. His delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. So he does not forget that it is God who has made us and not we ourselves. The Psalms, the language of the Psalms keep coming out. The ideas in the Psalms keep coming out. Every time we think about a part of one psalm, we are reminded of some thematic refrain about who God is and what God is like and what God deserves and what God desires. And David doesn't miss a beat when it comes to talking about that. Yes, sir. I thought you playing with your microphone.
No, it wasn't me that time.
Huh? Oh, it wasn't you? All right. I just need Gladys to help me with that part. Yeah. So he acknowledges that if there's any measure of success, any accomplishment in his life, his accomplishments are not because they're not the result of his own intellect, his own wisdom. He's not the genius behind his success, but the genius behind his success is the God who counsels him. And so rather than patting himself on the back or accepting the accolades of other people who might pat him on the back, he keeps his focus, as the person asking a question a few minutes ago, he keeps his focus and is recognized that he's not ordering his own steps, but that his steps are being ordered by God, who counsels him. If we could figure that out, perhaps, and lean less on our own inferred wisdom, our own sense of wisdom or intellect or skill or knowledge, we'd recognize that except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain who build it. So if he doesn't help us, then we are helpless. But if he does help us, then we can do anything. And to give God praise, to give God glory, to give God thanks for allowing us to be his partners is a way to ensure that our success will continue, that our progress will go on. And so the psalmist is careful in, is that verse 7, Mary, or 8? That was 7, I think. To give God credit. I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. So it's the reason so many of us are able to keep our wits about us when so many others of us are terrified. I had a conversation with someone today who told me he was afraid to go to work, even though his job is continuing. And he's afraid to go to work because his fear is that he might contract the virus, and he might take the virus to his family. And so he's not going to work. Guess what else is not happening? He ain't getting paid. And so instead of suffering because of the virus, because he brought the virus home, they're suffering because he ain't bring no bacon. killed another battery. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Question. How do we know when the boundaries in our lives are placed by God,
How do we
like
know what?
David? How do we know that the boundaries in our lives have been placed by God, like David did?
Well, for me, when the boundaries in my life keep me on the inside of the blessings, I give God thanks and praise because of the good things that have happened to me. If the boundaries that I find in life keep me on the wrong side of benefits and blessings, I don't ascribe them to God as much as I ascribe my blessings to God. When good things happen, I never say that the devil blessed me. When good things happen to me, I find myself in a good position. I'll never ascribe to anyone other than God a benefit, a blessing, an opportunity to do good for someone else or with someone else, or an opportunity to enjoy something in which I delight. And so I always thank God for blessings. I thank God for benefits. I thank God because I don't believe that God would create a peaceful, pleasant place to be and then wall me out. But I do believe that God would create a peaceful, beneficial, blessing place for me and wall me in, so that when I ask for a hedge, a wall of protection around me, I don't want to be on the wrong side of the wall. I don't want to be on the wrong side of the hedge. I want to be on that place on the inside where the blessings are coming down. And so when they come down, I ascribe them to God. I say it's God who has created this benefit for me. And I think it's true of the nature of God to be good and to do good. And it is true of the nature of our enemy is to treat us in harmful, hurtful, unsatisfying, unpleasing ways. So I distinguish between the good and the bad, and I give God glory. Yeah, I wish we could carry on the dialogue, and maybe you'll come meet us sometime when we can meet in real life. We can argue that. So David celebrates the fact that he has access to these things, wealth and not poverty, opportunity and not the lack of opportunity, good things and not bad things. So when he looks around his life and he starts to catalog the landmarks of his blessings, there's no shortage of them. And there's about to be a landmark that if what's said in 2 Samuel is true, a landmark that would endure even to the birth of Jesus and beyond. And that's why some scholars call this a messianic psalm. And when he's talking about not being shaken in verse 8 of Psalm 16, it's all the attempts that were made to nullify the work of Jesus and to truncate it, to cut it off, to keep it from taking place. But God made a covenant with David, and Jesus is a part of that plan, and he is not shaken, and his work is not shaken, his service is not shaken, his ministry is not shaken, even though there have been those who tried to, then and now, to undo it, to eradicate it, to say, see, as Caiaphas and Annas said after the Lazarus came back from the grave, we're going to have to do something about this man because everybody's going crazy after him. And so it was the effort of those who would bow down before some other god, who tried to undo the work of Jesus. But it had already been said in this prophetic way in Psalm 16. What do the last two verses say, or three verses, Mary? Therefore, because of all these other things, my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure, because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, nor will you let your faithful one see decay. That's that Jesus. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. That's how I know that God created these boundaries for me, because in a prophetic way, it's uttered in these words, and based on every experience that I've ever had with God, he's brought it to pass. So the body of Christ did not see decay. As a matter of fact, it didn't stay in the grave long enough for the process of decay really to set in, so that it did not begin to decay the way in the physical process of the decay of a body it takes place. And that's another sign that this psalm is a messianic psalm. It's a psalm about something that will happen in the house and lineage in the kingdom of David. In a time beyond David's time. And when we put together what David knew and when he knew it, and what Mary, his mother, knew, and when Mary, the mother of Jesus, and when she knew it, and what we know on this side of the resurrection, he was preparing us long before he sent the Savior to live among us. But when he appeared, we were able to recognize him because of the things that had been said about him that were true about him, uniquely true about him, and not about anybody else. And so when we're looking for good things in the midst of COVID-19, we're looking for good things in the midst of sheltering in place, we're looking for good things in the midst of a declining economy, we're looking for good things when we are watching our wealth flow out through holes in our bags, we're watching our life savings disappear and wondering whether we'll live long enough to recover them. We have this word of reassurance, this word of promise about some good things, so that in the midst of all that is no good, there's this one thing that's really good, and as God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in the time of trouble. We're glad that you are able to be with us tonight in this virtual way, and pray that you will join us in prayer as we continue. And as the days and nights continue, we'll meet here just like this on Sunday at 11 o'clock. We're working at trying to do our Sunday school this way. And the person you can't see, but you always hear from her, Mary White, who's one of our premier Sunday school teachers, and Reverend Holly working on being able to have our Sunday schools transmitted over by Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, so that we won't have to get behind in our study of the Word of God, but that we'll always be reassured of His promises, and that reassurance is encouragement for us in all our circumstances. Thank you for being with us tonight, and we pray that you'll join us again really, really soon. God bless you, and you have a good evening. Thank you, Mary.